Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'd like to officially restart the Finance Committee meeting that was not concluded on yesterday. And with that, the time is 8:08 a.m. At this time, I'd like for a roll call for the Finance Committee.
Actually, what I would do is make a motion to resume the meeting.
Okay, I like that better. I'd like to propose a motion to resume the Finance Committee meeting.
So moved.
You second it.
All right, thank you. First on the agenda.
Well, second, actually, let me call a roll. Just
Okay.
Trustee Norfleet,
Yes.
Trustee Tucker.
Present.
Okay.
And I'm also here, Trustee Trauber, by Zoom.
Okay. Trustee Trubber. So then just call the roll again. I'll call the roll. Trustee Norfleet,
Here.
Trustee Tucker,
Present.
Trustee Trober.
Present.
Okay.
Okay.
Quorum.
All right. Today's agenda is going to finish up with any questions on the institutional development organization. And then from there, we're going to pick back up with the questions regarding the proposed fee increase. And then we'll finish up the rest of our approval agenda right after that. So with that, we had a pre-meeting, and I suggested that we give a little time here for board members who had any follow-up questions to ask that to you this morning. So we're not going to go back through the presentation. So any follow-up questions from yesterday on development?
Okay.
You get the first to arrive and leave without having to say anything. Thank you. Okay. At this point, there were some follow-up items that we talked about yesterday, and Doug has put together some follow-up materials. And at this time, Doug, you want to provide an update?
Good morning, Board. We left the discussion on yesterday in reference to 8 items that are part of the decision-making process for this board to determine a tuition and fee increase. On page 90 in your board documents, item number 4, at the bottom of the page, the 8 factors the board will consider when setting tuition and mandatory fee increases are as follows: level of state support, total cost of attendance, efforts to mitigate the negative financial effects on students, THEC mandatory tuition and fee ranges, inflationary cost, student and fee levels at peer institutions and competing institutions, students' demand, and we finish with other factors pertinent to the cost of the university's operations and programs of study. In section 4, item A, the level of state support for Tennessee State University is our state appropriations at 24%. The total cost of attendance, if the 5.5% tuition and fee increase is approved, is in-state on-campus, $27,113. Out-of-state on-campus, $40,865. In-state off-campus, $35,102, and out-of-state off-campus, $48,854. The next item, efforts to mitigate the negative financial effect on students. As we were building the budget, we often look at ways that will provide the least impact on our faculty, staff, and students. I eliminated any vacant positions that were greater than 1 year. If they were not being used within a year, there was no need, I think, at this time, to continue those into the budget rolling into 24-25. We also looked at contracts, met with the cabinet, and we determined that there were contracts that we did not need to renew. I also looked at any auto renewals. Again, if they were not needed, Those were costs that we could cut without necessarily impacting students as well. So we took those measures and were able to reduce the budget some. But it still allowed, still have opportunities there for other costs, as I'll mention. The THEC mandatory tuition and fee range that was set by the commission was a range between 0 and 5.5% for fiscal year 25. The next item is inflationary cost, and current inflation is 3.5%. And that's a pretty large number when you're thinking about the cost of goods, facilities maintenance, utilities consumption, and again, so that's where we are with inflationary costs. It's about a $1.9 million overall estimated budget increase just for inflation. Tuition and fees at peer institutions and competing institutions. I just looked at our in-state LGI institutions. I didn't take in effect or consideration other HBCUs as we operate within the state of Tennessee. Austin P, what they had proposed is 4.0%. East Tennessee, 3.8%. Middle Tennessee, 5.24%. Tennessee State, 5.5% proposed. Tennessee Tech, 5.05%, and University of Memphis, 3.5%. And as I explained and showed the chart yesterday that kind of outlined the tuition and fee history since 1985, we were in the middle of the pack as far as cost. And since about 2005, we've been at the lowest end of the spectrum as it relates to cost. Student demand, we had an increase for scholarships, primarily band scholarships, and also other student support services, as we mentioned yesterday, that being with advisory services, counseling services, and there's just, there's other numerous programs that Dean Stevenson puts on for our students. Other factors pertinent to the cost of the university operation and programs of study. Academic affairs, there was an increase of $1.1 million. Again, that for the Smart Center and AI, and also for just continuation of academic programs and any new programs that were brought forward by the provost. We had a faculty and salary pool of $900,000. That includes, again, just a 3% differential in cost that the state provided, and we have a salary pool for faculty, and this is more of a performance-based pool that was brought forward last year. I think that was a huge boost for the faculty, given the fact that we do have some departments, some faculty members that are below market. Just keeping in mind that we're trying to do those things to help raise our faculty to the level that they need to be, though we're not there yet, but we're continuously working through that as well. So that takes us through the 8 points. As I mentioned, we fight very hard each and every day for our students. We want to provide the best experience here. We understand that we have aging infrastructure that does cost us more money each year. Just the cost of utilities, and while again trying to maintain the residence halls that have seen their useful life plus some. So those are the factors that I bring to you today. And at this time, I would entertain any question that you all may have.
I'll just chime in. So I just want to say thank you for going through those factors, just so that we as a board know that when you all are collaborating and deliberating over what the students are going to have to pay, that we are really strategically thinking through all of the narratives and all of the things that a student is going to experience so that they know, this is just not a scenario wherein things are being taken lightly, and
Right.
each one of their dollars that they're spent are appreciated and thought carefully through so that they can have the best experience at the university. So thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Any additional discussion? Board members. Charles, if you cannot hear or speak to the other board members, please state so as your name is called for roll. For each board member participating electronically, please identify any individuals who are present in your automobile with you while you're participating in the board meeting. Charles.
Yeah. So right now, I'm actually on the golf cart on my way to be with you in person. So I apologize, but I am a TSU employee that is taking me to the meeting.
Okay, but you can hear us.
I can't hear you.
Okay. Do you need anything else, Lawrence, for the minutes? Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Follow-up? I'd like to engage the Finance Committee in terms of approval of the fiscal 2024-25 tuition and mandatory fees increase. I move to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 24-25 tuition and mandatory fees increase as continued or contained in the board materials for the June 7th, 2024. Is there a second?
Second.
The question on the motion to recommend to the full board the fiscal year 2024-25 tuition and mandatory fees as contained in the board materials for June 7th. Secretary Pendleton, please call the roll.
Trustee Norfleet,
Yes.
Trustee Tucker,
Yes.
Trustee Torber,
Yes.
3 yeses.
Okay. The next approval item on the Finance Committee is to approve the fiscal year 2023-24 estimated budget. The materials for this agenda has been included in the board materials for the day's meeting. Doug, do you want to give a few highlights?
Yes. On last week, we kind of had a working meeting that allowed me to go line by line on the summary pages of the budget for FY 24-25 and the estimated budget for 23-24. I think just our discussion relative to the tuition and fee increase was the primary driver for the, of course, 24-25 proposed budget. And the estimated budget just provides where we estimate to be at the end of this fiscal year. So if there are any questions, I will entertain those at this time.
Any additional discussion items regarding the 23-24 estimated budget? Is there a question, Dr. Glover? Oh, there's a sidebar. Okay. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to recommend to the full board approval of the fiscal 23-24 estimated budget?
You can make the motion yourself, and he can second it.
Okay. That's right, because we're down to 2 of us here in person. I move a motion to approve the 23-24 estimated budget
question is on.
Oh, okay. I recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 23-24 estimated budget as contained in the board materials for the June 7th, 24 board meeting.
So that's the called question, correct?
My talking points were out of order, excuse me. The question is on the motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 23-24 estimated budget as contained in the board materials for the June 7th, 24 board meeting. Secretary Pendleton, please call the roll.
Secretary, Trustee Norfleet,
Yes.
Trustee Trustee Trubber,
Yes.
and Trustee Tucker.
Yes.
Okay. You have 3 yeses.
The next agenda item is approval of the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget. The materials for this agenda item was included also in your board material submitted for the day's meeting. Doug.
As I just stated, during our working meeting, we went through the budget in detail, again, on this morning. The major driver for the fiscal year 24-25 budget was the request for the tuition and fee increase, and then the breakout of those costs associated with that 5.5% increase. If there are any questions, I will entertain those at this time.
I just have a statement for the Finance Committee as well as the full board. I do believe and support the increase in fees, but I also think there's a big opportunity in the budget to challenge ourselves, and that would be for the management team to put together a plan and identify at least, I think, $5 to $7 million in reduction of operating costs, and then present that back and update the board over the course of the coming year. Because I think, raising the revenue, you also need to look for ways to be more efficient in the operations. And if we can do that and reduce the run rate for operating expenses in the proposed budget over the year, then I think that gives management much flexibility to address or reset some of the challenges that we have in terms of looking within ourselves around the enrollment strategy, as well as what I call the student experience when they come to Tennessee State, and then also clean up some of the other outstanding items that require what I call attention that takes us away from focusing on some of the big things that we need to do to move the organization forward. So with that, I'm just making a statement for, as part of the discussion, that management comes back with a plan to also look to be more efficient and take out some expense, and then update the board with that as we talk about the budget going forward.
Yes, sir. Statement noted.
And just to follow up on that comment, because yesterday I asked a question about the tuition increase and looking at it, if there was a reduction by 0.5%, and that would result in $500,000 less in revenue. And your response was that the school has already cut and was bare bones, and the result of that would be a cut in staff. Is that still correct?
Yes, that is correct. We could look at other contracts that we may have, et cetera. But my job is to tell you what the facts are. And the facts are, if we have to do that, we would then start looking to have to let employees go.
So with that, and thinking about the enrollment information we were given and also the retention rates, because I understand, I guess 2021 or 2022, there was an explosion with the freshman incoming class, but that's now tapered off. So has that resulted in the need to maybe back off some of the things that were added from the school standpoint of OpEx, or potentially even staffing, that now the numbers have tapered off to a more manageable number? Does that result in any potential OpEx savings?
Yes, so some of the costs during the year, and which was FY22, that we had the record enrollment, the costs that were associated with that were hotels, transportation, and security. there were additional faculty members added to cover those students in the classroom. We no longer have the hotels or security or the shuttle services for that. So those costs were direct relationships with the influx of enrollment. But, and, I'm sorry, excuse me. And then the faculty, that's driven based on, again, enrollment and looking at having to bring more adjunct faculty on board. So that number fluctuates based on the number of students that are here at TSU. So not having I think the record enrollment is great. It was just hard to manage. Now that we've kind of tapered that back off, intentionally tapered that back off, that has allowed us then to kind of reset. But that reset is twofold. One, looking at the costs that have been cut, and then two, needing to raise our revenues just to keep up with, inflation and other costs to maintain the university. I will say, for every 0.5%, roughly 500,000, that is going to possibly cut into student support services as well. That's, I think, just the reality.
Can you spend about 30 seconds on the discussion item that I brought up regarding being able to identify other opportunities to cut out costs and expense over the current upcoming fiscal year? I threw out 5 to 7. I know we didn't talk about that in advance, but in some of our prior conversations, you seem to be pretty comfortable that, especially since payroll is one of the biggest drivers, are there opportunities to consolidate some organizations, maximize some spans of control, eliminate individual contributors, but also look at other operational expenses? Because right now, I think we're somewhat tied up in a lot of things, but are there RFPs that we can send out to be able to ensure that we're getting the best market price for some of our big contracts and
Absolutely.
what I would call low-hanging fruit?
Yes.
In terms of that target, is that something that I guess from you and President Glover could come back and say, okay, we feel comfortable with this target of 7?
Well, actually, we have talked about the target. We've already started. We've cut out some of it. We've cut out I'm not sure what the number is now, but our actual goal was to get $5 million cut.
Right.
And so we've done that, some of it. We don't have it all yet. And then we looked at how many consultants we had, renegotiating some of the same thing you were saying, renegotiating some of the other contracts, looking at in the line items that were not filled. So we can go back and sharpen our pencils and
Right.
look at some more. Sure, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other discussion items? Go ahead, Trustee Smith.
We had previously requested a copy of the line item budget. Will we get that?
I believe that was included in the
That was actually,
information sent out to the
that was
board.
included in the packet, yes.
Yeah.
Lawrence can speak to that.
Yeah, I sent that out when I sent some previous email that was included.
It's not in this book, right?
No, that was,
not in
because
here.
that was a request pursuant to a previous meeting. And so I sent that out to the board.
Robert.
And did that also include the balance sheet?
Yes.
Balance sheet is in your packet here.
But it was also sent in advance. too,
It was,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
it was.
Any other questions? Discussion? Is there a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget? I move to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget as contained in the board materials for the June 7th board meeting. Is there a second?
So moved, but then it needs to be seconded. Correct.
Second.
The question is on the motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget as contained in the board materials for the June 7th, 24 board meeting. Secretary Pendleton, please call the roll.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? 3 ayes.
That concludes the approval requirements for the Finance Committee, and we can go back to the informational updates, starting with deferred maintenance. And Will, can you join us?
Good morning. My name is Will Radford, Assistant Vice President, Planning, Design, and Construction and Campus Operations. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this morning the deferred maintenance plan update that started on page 120 in your brief. There are basically 3 pieces that I will share. I'll show the plan, the logic, and the timeline. Pardon me while I read the background information. On January 31st, 2022, Governor Bill Lee recommended $250 million for capital improvement projects at Tennessee State University. This document details TSU's $250 million state strategic deferred maintenance plan, which primarily addresses deferred maintenance and infrastructure improvements. The plan will be executed over 3 to 5 years. The investment addresses life safety issues and deferred maintenance while advancing select academic buildings needed to increase the number of Tennessee graduates prepared for high-skill, high-wage, and high-demand jobs. Deferred maintenance refers to major facility renewals and repairs that are delayed for budgetary reasons. Deferred maintenance includes fire alarms, air conditioning, electrical, elevators, heating, plumbing, and roofing. Tennessee State University's present deferred maintenance backlog exceeds $500 million. I invite you to look on page 122. This highlights the 5-year plan. This plan is a dynamic plan that changes as the continued research and tracking of maintenance and facility needs on this campus changes. So what I'm presenting to you is how would TSU spend this $250 million today? But I can assure you tomorrow, on yesterday, when I was made aware that the chiller at the General Services building went out and 5 of the 6 compressors are down, that is a function that would affect how we'd approach this. At present, our partnership with Jones Lang LaSalle gives us the opportunity to respond acutely, but the information and the data that I have helps me predict that. Those predictions is what informs the 5 years of information that's in front of you. So this is a visual outlook on the plan. Now, the logic that informs this plan is 3 parts. One is looking back at the 2008, 2016, 2020, 2023 data that we have about this campus. In 2008, the team that was assembled to do facilities condition assessments at TSU said these words: specifically with respect to TSU campus facilities, the current allocations are not sufficient to support its buildings and grounds, much less construction of new facilities or a substantial change in the curriculum delivery system. As a result, the students in many cases do not have access to state-of-the-art facilities. TSU is not the only institution within its peer group in state or out of state with respect to lack of adequate funding, but it is this condition that makes TSU more serious than other institutions. With respect to construction of new facilities, there's very few projects that have been provided so far. However, TSU's plan must not reflect the piecemeal approach, but it should look for the comprehensive approach. So what I've put in front of you is a comprehensive approach. So if I point you to year 3 looks to inject 7 projects that mimic and model what was provided in year 1 and year 2. So it starts with consultant services, campus migration, electrical infrastructure, utility tunnel structural repair, utility metering, and then at the fall of the year, building comprehensive repair. Now, this logic is the way that we would propose moving forward. However, we will continue to work with TBR and other state stakeholders and modify the plan as necessary according to those inputs. But I did not want to skip the step that is the result of our analysis over 4 different studies over 16 years that tells us for 16 years, TSU has approached deferred maintenance in a systems component approach, and it has resulted in the need to continually resolve these issues. And what we are proposing in this plan is a comprehensive approach that models what is happening currently with Davis Humanities. You'll see those documents in your packet that begin on page 124. And I apologize if this was out of order or too much information, but I wanted you to see in attachment A the data that comes from consulting services and partnerships, which is why I'm recommending that for every year and every step that we take. And then in attachment B, how TSU takes that data and processes an executive summary that will inform our actions. And in attachment C, what it is prepared to go to the State Building Commission. I wanted you all to be able to see how we take the data and convert it into actions that we put before the state for their review and approval. And in attachment D, you'll see an example of how the finances are laid out and how the budget numbers that you see are broken down to bid targets, maximum allowable construction cost, the testing, the other consulting fees that are part of deferred maintenance. I will stop there and entertain questions, but I remind you this plan is dynamic. So as we continue to work with TBR, if there are changes or recommendations, we will absorb those changes and determine how to make that fit. But our goal from the onset is to trust the data and allow it to inform how we move forward from a building perspective.
Thanks, Will. In terms of your prior update that you provided to the board and today's update, has any new projects been added to take it off?
Yes, as I mentioned, the dynamic nature of the fire alarm systems have become more important. We have, anytime a fire alarm system goes down, it requires what's called fire watch, which means at that instant we must hire a consultant to spend 24 hours in this building, checking every hour to ensure there is no fire. Because of that reason, one of the buildings was removed, and that dynamic need was moved forward.
And the second question, and I'll open it up to the Finance Committee and then the full board. Relative to the projects in year 2 that have been approved, can you give me the 30 seconds in terms of where they start, the start of those projects? Have they already started or to be determined?
I know. All of the projects that you see under year 2, which are Gentry Center roofing, it has started. Gentry Center roofing, we waited to after graduation, but that roof is being replaced right now. And the contractors look to have it finished before the fall semester starts. The Agricultural Environmental Science building is under design. It is progressing according to schedule. The site plan is complete. The building program is complete. And the partner that TSU has taken for that project has performed very well. The electrical primary infrastructure work, as you would see if you drive across campus and see the roads torn up, that project is $9 million that was added to a 4-year funding project, but it continues to move forward. It is about 30 days behind, and that was due to a larger amount of rock removal that was required before the pipe and infrastructure could be installed. The multi-building electrical upgrade is one of the piecemeal projects that was designed at the initial. The equipment required takes about 2 years to procure, so we can order it today, and in 2026 it'll show up. That project is in a holding pattern, waiting on that material to show up. And then the campus master plan update is an ongoing effort, which I'm not briefing today, but that has gotten to a point that we have paused and are determining future plans as it relates to future leadership and future master plans.
So I do have one other question. Have we communicated to the broader staff at the university and students around the projects that are underway that have been approved so that there could be some understanding that some progress is made, or small progress has been made along the way to addressing some of the facilities issues. Have we communicated?
When you
The
say
status of project?
broader campus, you mean employees here at TSU?
Yes,
Yeah, we
and
do
staff.
have university communication that goes out, and then I think primarily these meetings serve as updates, and then we do a campus update twice a year that just happened earlier this week. So there are vehicles for those communications to go out. Certainly, there could be more marketing around it. That's not presently what sits with me, but there are offices that do that and get updates from us and share it around the university.
All right. Any questions from the members of the Finance Committee? Of the board trustees? Go ahead.
I've got a list of them.
All right.
And we'll just go back and forth. So can you outline and share with us the contracting firms that we use to help assist with you? As a matter of fact, let me back up on the question. Can you share with the board, because I'm not sure if everybody knows the full extent of how your shop is set up and the number of individuals that you have helping and working with your team? And then can you share also the consulting firms that you use to help develop the plans as we get ready to move forward?
Sure. So the planning, I lead 3 divisions, planning, design, and construction. And that is a team of 3 that were here when I arrived. I've been able to add 1 permanent person. I've been able to add 2 permanent people and 2 contract people. That team performs all of the planning, design, and construction services. That includes internal design projects where we're renovating the bursar's office or renovating the post office, but it also includes design management services when we work with partners like Bauer Askew or Moody Nolan or Klein Sweeney or I.C. Thomason. These are consultants that we have contracted to work with TSU to provide not only support services in the specific lane, but also assistance in terms of helping upskill some of the legacy TSU employees that we have at some of the state requirements and standards on how to complete the June and July capital project request, capital maintenance submission, which is a lengthy process that requires us to study every department on campus, deal with enrollment, deal with projections. So it is quite involved, and several of the consultants that we work with have performed those services across the state of Tennessee for many years, and it's been a core career for them, and they are lending those services and those competencies to TSU as we continue to grow the department. In addition, the campus operations, which handles a lot of the engineering aspects and the future projections for utilities, the projections for consumption, the negotiation of rates, we depend on the engineering firms to provide really confirmation of our work. And that is a process that I'm really passionate about, TSU producing its own work and then working with consultants to get confirmation on how close or far we are from those professional recommendations. But that is designed to increase our capacity until we have the right number of people. But it has worked sufficient, and from our view, to get us to the point where we can look at the data, determine the projects that need to be prioritized, develop pricing for those projects. And to speak to pricing, Skanska is a partner that we've used who builds a pricing model for the entire Middle Tennessee region. They update that pricing model based on factors that have nothing to do with TSU, but it allows TSU to use that real market data that says, here's what it costs for the buildings going up downtown, from Murfreesboro, anywhere in Middle Tennessee. So when we put an estimate for it, from our perspective, it is real market data beyond higher ed. We can't get someone to go from downtown to TSU and give us a discount. We have to pay the same rates. So because of that, we went to the market to get that data. So those are the steps that we are taking to develop the plan, to support the logic of that plan with facts, and then to project the timelines. So every cost you see has escalation associated with it. So what's in year 5, this year it wouldn't cost the same thing it would cost in year 5. But for the year 5 projection, we've looked at 1% per month, which is 12% per year, over the cost that we are recording and reporting from real market data today. And those are the steps and the amounts of details that we are going to make sure our plans are solid. That being said, we're not above partnering with other stakeholders and allowing them to review the work and to make recommendations. As you'll see at the end of your packet, that is the next step after this. And I apologize, that's on page 123 at the top. The following deferred maintenance projects will be grouped and prepared for presentation to TBR for review and submission to the State Building Commission. So we will continue to work through the process, but I want you to know how prepared we are on the front end and not walking into it asking someone to tell us what to do or asking someone to help us figure out what to do. We have the details and the support to get that done here on campus through partnerships. Does that answer your question, Madam Chair?
Yes, thank you. My next question is in regards to the migration plan. Can you just give a high-level overview of, for the projects that you know we'll need to try to address immediately, what that migration plan is going to look like, and how would that impact the students in any way, or how have you thought that through?
Sure. I'll answer that in two ways, but from the top view, I'll point you back to page 20. The plan considers existing master plan and anticipates a new master plan as, the first sentence, which the typical individual component repair does not address that. So it goes into a building, it opens it up, it repairs a fire alarm system. That inconveniences students for that project. If I come back 6 months later with a mechanical, it inconveniences the students, the staff again. So our approach is not to take the systems, and it's 10 systems or better in each building, but to take the entire building, to create temporary or combined use. So we have Clement Hall, we have Humphreys Hall, we have temporary structure that we plan to bring on campus that will create additional classroom space that allows staff and students to move. And while they're there, we repair all of those components at once. Inconveniencing them one time, albeit longer, it limits the amount of adjustments, it limits the amount of risk, and it increases the safety that's high on the chart for me, because students, contractors know they're working on campus, but from experience, it's not their highest priority to protect students. So for my job, I want to separate the students from the work as best I can, and that involves the way we've structured it. Physically, as it relates to buildings, for every 2 buildings, the reason that we only do 2 buildings is because our current migration plan is limited and we don't want to extend the cost. But when we go into those buildings and prepare it, we can only really accommodate 20 to 30,000 square feet. And that's about the size of 2 buildings that would be moving and shifting on campus at one time. Were it not for that, we would bring all these buildings forward at once, because as mentioned, deferred maintenance is due to budgetary reasons. If we have the budget now, every day we wait, the cost goes up. And so even the buildings that are in year 4 and year 5, those will be more expensive because we're waiting for no other reason. But we're waiting because we have limited migration space. But we have determined 2 buildings at a time will make it possible for us to absorb the classrooms. There will be some staffing pivots where staff have office hours and other spaces, but classrooms are what we are primarily planning around. I apologize for the long-winded answer.
No, that's great, thank you. My next question is about the utility tunnel structural repair. You have it listed as summer 2024. Is that still the plan? And I guess my question is, why is that one necessary in terms of the safety aspect for the students?
Well, deferred maintenance is not limited to safety. It includes mechanical, electrical. So our tunnel, which runs underground here at TSU, is required to heat and cool every building. Right now, if you walk in that tunnel, and I have once, I don't prefer to go down there, but 100 feet underground, when you get in there, you realize we have lights in there. We are moving to have communication in there, but we have water that is built scale on the floor, which has the capacity to challenge the structural integrity. So from my point, sending people into something that you know has a known deficiency just to keep buildings heated and cooled, that's not a risk I'm willing to take. And so I want to prioritize how we provide for a tunnel that, if you read reports from 16 years ago, it says what we know now, and that's not been action because there's not been budget. So from my perspective, the structural integrity of the tunnel is a huge issue because without it, you can't heat and cool the majority of the buildings on campus. In addition to that, our future plans will look at how do we expand the tunnel to accommodate new buildings, because the reduction of these costs that we were just discussing is impacted by the amount of heating and cooling that we can produce ourselves versus high energy consuming standalone units that are in buildings that are not connected to the campus tunnel system. So it has safety as it relates to the staff that make these spaces tempered for students and for the faculty, it makes it for students and staff. But from a future perspective as well, this is a double win because we will have the structure necessary to make it possible. These dollars don't include increasing capacity, but they increase the opportunity for us to have future capacity that reduces our energy consumption or our energy cost.
And then my last question is in regards to the master plan that is due for 2026. So what steps are you already thinking about and preparing for as you get ready to think through? Because we've got this deferred maintenance plan, but the master plan obviously incorporates some parts of it, but really separate thing, really more perspective thinking. How are you already preparing for that?
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. The first is a lot of what you see is connected, again, to 2008, 2016 master plans. So a lot of what 24 is projecting can be above and beyond the deferred maintenance. The deferred maintenance has been so protracted and so consistent, either one of those master plans could have been useful for this. Now, as it reflects to the future, the sequencing of the buildings that's presented to you has to do with recognizing buildings that have higher, let me find the term that I want to use, that are more mission critical to Tennessee State University. And so those buildings are prioritized because whether the new master plan happens this year or it happens in 2 years, these buildings still will get the care they need to be relevant to Tennessee State University right now. And to take the piecemeal approach over the next 3 years and to make those buildings incrementally improved but not ready for a new master plan is one of the challenges that I would ask us not to give ourselves. A future master plan will look at the schools and the colleges and determine what's needed. Previous master plans have done the same thing. Much of the action we're taking is continuing what was in previous master plans in preparation and anticipation of a future one, and not taking risks that could be changed with the new master plan. I assume that would be the reason for the question and the interest and the concern. It's not that we've thought through everything, but that was one that was high on the list with the SBC in November of last year, and so we took note and made adjustments for that reason. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion for Will? No, good job.
Thank
Thanks.
you so much.
You want to briefly let everybody know where you're going on your vacation? I want to go, but go ahead.
So it's not quite a vacation,
Yeah.
but I am joining TSU in its higher ed HBCU African Education Conference and going to Accra, Ghana tonight, and we'll be there for a period of 2 weeks recruiting master's, graduate level students to come to TSU and participate in the fine institution that we have that helps change lives. And many of you may know, but TSU, last me when I was 15, I spent every summer at TSU from 15 to 18, and it's the way that the future of a rural Arkansan changed. So I think that is something that I want to share with as many people as I can get to see TSU as the light that I see it as, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to go and represent TSU. Thank you, Trustee Tucker.
All right. Yes. Our next agenda item is the TSAC program review update. Doug?
Okay. In your packets on page 135, TSAC staff joined us and gave a presentation on the 29th of May. They followed up to a discussion that we had, again, with the board members that are present and those that are not present. At the time, we had 16 of 24 items. On page 135, it shows actually 15, but the day of the meeting, we were able to clear one more. So where we stand as of today, and I did speak with TSAC yesterday morning, they're going to be clearing items number 11. That's the failure to verify Hope Scholarship eligibility. And also item number 15, lack of enrollment monitoring. We had to send back some additional funds. The state finance department has receipted the funds. So they're doing their final work on these two items, but they will be completed, I do believe, today. So that'll take us to 18 of the 24 items. Again, we're grateful for Dr. Gentile providing staff to assist us in getting the remaining items completed. They are actually on campus as we speak. I had a chance to see them the day before just to check in and see where we are. The primary focus is on CPAS, which is item number 17. We're still, I know CO Evans and his team are working extremely hard to get to receive the remaining transcripts that are needed. And our consultant has completed her testing on item number 24. So we are now working on those implementation pieces based on the findings from their work. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the Finance Committee?
Yeah, so based on our last Finance Committee meeting, and what I understood TSAC to say was that it was important to have all items clear by June 15th. So where are we in terms of that timeline?
So I believe she stated, Leah has stated that we wanted to get all the items clear, but noting that CPAS and transcripts were the major two things. So that's an ongoing process. But then it allows us, so they're coming back actually in July to start for 23, 24. So they're going to be here continuously doing that, but we do have a little leadway in doing the work. So we have all hands on deck to complete that. It is taking a little bit of time, but our goal is to complete it next week.
Trustee Trevor, may I add something? I've been in contact with Dr. Gentile at THAC, who has just been really supportive of TSU. He sent team out to assist us, to work hands-on with us to get through this process. They, yes, June 15th is a date they've discussed with us, and I think it may be having in writing. But he's allowed us to still invoice or certify, and they're not holding up the funds at this point. Next year is a different year, but they're still allowing us to receive the payments, even notwithstanding the fact that they gave us a June 15th deadline.
So will any of those payments be clawed back if June 15th is not met, or is there any risk to the payments that are being allowed?
So no, the good news is they're going to allow us to bill in July for any remaining for that 22-23 fiscal year. Yeah, so what I was told on Wednesday is that they'll give a one-time exception for us to do that. And they've allowed that for other institutions before.
Well, just making sure I'm tracking with you myself as well. On the certification of transcripts where students aren't coming back, I'm assuming it's going to be, you get to some point in time where
Yes.
you won't be able to certify those. So I guess the conclusion on that would be, are we anticipating that funds will not be received for that small group of?
That is a possibility, absolutely.
And so in terms of sizing up that potentially now, do you have a view about what that could be?
I can't give a number right now just because we're still working through.
Right.
And actually, we've taken an additional step and I'm not sure if the letter has come across your desk to review Attorney Pendleton, but that allows for students to sign and allow us the opportunity to reach out to the schools directly. So there was another step in the process to help us get those transcripts.
So what's the total number you think that's currently outstanding that hasn't been certified?
I believe
Mr. Evans is
is
here.
here?
He has to tell us that number.
That would be our worst case, and then I guess as you chip it along,
Sure.
then you got a better case. What's the worst case?
The number of students, the number of
So
transcripts that's still
the
outstanding
remaining
right now.
transcripts of the 1,045 originally missing is 230.
Okay.
And the legal review has been done on the letter that I sent directly to the schools, at the same time having to send the consent form to the students because it's a FERPA. And so they're under no obligation to provide it to us without the student consent, so we sent it anyway, and at the same time sent the consent form to the students. And so we should start seeing the results of that hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
So our worst case would be somewhere around 200.
Right. And the transcripts are a different issue from CPOS.
All right.
That was, I think the transcripts is question number 4 or 5. CPOS is a different question. I'm the part of the solution to fixing the CPOS in terms of degree works and hiring the degree works technician, which has been hired. He's a temporary employee currently. And so that CPOS is being reconciled between OAA and financial aid.
Thanks for clarity. Any other questions?
Just one, and I may have to ask you to come back. So last time we were together, you all mentioned that you had certified about $1.1 million. Where are we now in terms of how much more you've certified?
We haven't certified much more just because we were waiting to get through the final transcript number, but we are due to do the final certification by the 15th.
Any other questions? Okay. That concludes our update on TSAC, and we'll move to the remaining final item on our agenda, and that's the business and finance update. President Glover, we're going to defer to Doug to start us off.
Yes, I
All right,
think
go ahead,
so.
Doug.
In the packet on page 138 is our statement of net position as of 3/31/2024. This was a informational item only as a request from the board to be presented in the packet. Again, it just outlines our assets, liabilities, and net position. Are there any questions related to this financial statement?
Finance Committee members, any questions? Board members, any follow-up questions for Doug and the materials? While we wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any additional questions, one thing I didn't talk about earlier as we get ready to close out, I think it's worthwhile from time to time to visit some of the controls and approvals that are in place for management. I think there's an opportunity for us to revisit, and one of the things I talked to Doug and soon to President Glover is regarding approval levels, such as, waiving student fees. I don't think we want to get into weeds on that, but if it's a big number that rises to a certain level, then there should be at least some conversations with the Finance Committee and then potentially the full board around that limit. Also, the transfer of funds from reserves is something I think we ought to look at in terms of oversight to ensure that the Finance Committee and the board on significant material items are in agreement and approved. And then as it relates to contracts, values in terms of those agreements, if they rise to a certain threshold that's material in some cases, I think we also ought to seek approval of those contracts and expenditures as well. But
Would you like for us to put together something
yes,
and get, okay?
yeah, I thought that we'll start with what's in place today
Okay.
and then offer some potential recommendations
All right.
at our next meeting.
No problem.
I was just killing time to see if anybody had any more questions on it.
What a way to get to that.
Okay. With that, if there's no additional business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee meeting.
Before we do that, I want to clarify that information was sent over on May 31st. It's in an email, the line item budget. So it was sent over, and it was sent to most of our TSU email addresses. So that may be why some people may have missed it. So I would like to clarify that it was sent over. So thank you.
Thank you. I move that the meeting adjourn.
So moved.
Secretary Pendleton, please call the roll.
Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There are 3 ayes.
Thanks, everyone.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. The June 7th Governance and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting of the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees is now called to order. The time is now 9:10 a.m. Central Time. I would like to welcome, I believe Rick Legion is on via Zoom. Is that correct? Okay.
Good morning, yes.
Yes, Rick is with the Association of Governing Boards, and the members of the Governance and Governmental Committees are Trustee Chapman and Chair Winton. At this time, we need to call the roll. Secretary Pendleton, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Smith?
Present.
Trustee Chapman?
Present.
Trustee Witten?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The first and only item on the agenda for this committee today is a board orientation presentation by Mr. Legion of the Association of Governing Boards. This is an informational discussion item and no vote is required. Mr. Legion, are you ready?
I am, thank you very much. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. I wish I was down where you are, but I'm sitting in my kitchen on Zoom, joining you. This meeting of the Governance Committee is important for all of you. It follows on some of the issues that we were briefly able to touch upon during the board's initial organizational meeting a month or so back. But what it does is it serves as a reminder not only to the overall responsibilities of the board, the new board of Tennessee State, but introduces the fact that the Governance Committee, and some of you are aware of the essentials of this from other boards in which you've served, the Governance Committee's fundamental responsibility for holding board members and the board as a corporate entity accountable for meeting its responsibilities. So it's a nice blending of both the committee's responsibilities in the context of the governing board's responsibilities. So I appreciate your inviting me to share some thoughts. I've asked Tim to help me by running some of the slides on this deck. I hope that as we go through the deck, you'll feel comfortable asking questions, making comments, but I hope we can have a more fulsome conversation at the back end of getting through this slide deck if we get there. So if that's okay with you, Madam Chair, that's how we will proceed. So Tim, let's go to the next slide if we can, please. This specifies some of the responsibilities of a committee that for the 40 years I've been doing this, working with boards of public and private institutions, I've stressed that if you want to get governance right, you need to have a governance committee that has a clear set of responsibilities and policies to ensure that the board as an entity is meeting its overall responsibilities. It's especially essential for your governance committee to have a sound governance set of processes backed up by all of the appropriate policy documents and statements. And you have a number of them, and I've reviewed them over the last month or so, and they're in pretty good shape. But you probably need to be open-minded to updating some and adding a few. But the point is that the governance committee's level of accountability to ensuring effective governance is fundamental to a successful board. Some of you may have heard, I put a quote on here from Clark Kerr. Clark Kerr is a noted historic figure, but he's a noted historic figure in higher education. His greatest historic role was being in the midst of leading the University of California system during the height of the Vietnam War, and University of California, of course, some of you may know, may recall, may have been there, that the University of California, much like what's been going on campuses in the last month or two, was a hotbed of protest related to that war. And so Clark Kerr was a provocative figure. And he said in a book that he wrote for the association that I was a part of, the Association of Governing Board, he wrote that ultimately, this is this top line of this slide, ultimately an institution, a college or university, will not be able to be any better than the quality and effectiveness of its governing board. I'd like you to just think about that. If anybody has any comments, jump in. But history has shown that that's in fact the case. That there are a lot of issues, of course, and you're dealing with many of them that face colleges and universities today. Tennessee State has its bucket list of things that need to be tended to, and the governance committee is going to have a key role in addressing those. But history really has said that unless governance is done well, unless we get governance right, the institution itself could suffer. And that refers back to the fact that the governance committee has a high level of responsibility to make sure that we do get governance right. So some of the specifics, responsibilities, they're in front of you, of a governance committee is that the committee is accountable for ensuring the performance of members of the governing board in meeting their individual responsibilities, but that the board as a fiduciary body, the corporate body, is meeting its responsibilities. Now, implicit in that is the fact that every member of your board needs to hold him and herself accountable for the responsibilities of acting as a fiduciary and meeting the responsibilities of the board. You know, in many ways, and you all know that, you're dealing with it, there's governance and the real fact that so much of what you do as a board and as a board member has political connotations, not running for office, but the fact, and I think I said this when I participated with you before, higher education and the institutions and the numbers of stakeholders that are interested, concerned, and try to influence the direction of an institution and therefore the board that has the ultimate authority for where the institution goes is a crowded sandbox. You've got internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. I think my understanding is that pretty much everybody, or maybe everybody on the new board of Tennessee State is in fact an alum, and that adds pressure. So it is a very, very crowded set of interests in this governance sandbox, and so the performance and the commitment and the responsibility and the calibrating of the processes that lead to effective governance really fall to the board, and this committee has a fundamental role in ensuring that the board gets it right. So this committee, moving on, develops and gains approval, initiates and advances uh, statements about board member responsibilities and expectations as fiduciaries. This fiduciary concept is essential. We'll get back to it in a minute, but you all know that you are fiduciaries, but that comes with legal standards and expectations that drive how members of the board and the board as an entity need to meet its responsibilities. So statements like codes of conduct, statement of responsibilities, which is a policy document that we could talk about, but I am a particularly fan of for board members, all get or should be generated and advanced by members of this committee. You have a small board, I get it, and I think most, if not all, members of the board are invited to all committees, and that's just fine. But the committee itself has a leadership role in advancing those kinds of policies. The committee does things such as the governance committee does such things as overseeing periodic assessments of board members, inclusive of self-assessments. You've all been in your role very briefly, so I wouldn't worry about it now. But at make sense periods during terms or at end of terms, prior to renewal of terms, if that should be potentially okay, the governance committee has an obligation, in my view of governance, effective governance, to have a robust assessment. And it's not just, giving board members a grade. Hey, you got an A, you got a D, you got a B. An essential part of an assessment is the self-assessment phrase, where board members have a chance periodically to say, this is what's working for me. This is what I think I could add to the board. I'd like an opportunity to move into leadership if that's possible. Or in fact, some board members may say, this isn't what I thought I'd sign up for, and maybe it's time for me to separate from the board. I'm not urging anyone to do that. But the assessment process led by an effective governance committee is inclusive of taking a hard look at how effective each member of the board is performing over time. The governance committee is responsible for this kind of endeavor that we're doing now, and that is building out a comprehensive orientation for members who are new to the board. And I'm a big believer that as board members are being vetted for appointment as a public board, as politically appointed board members, that board members should be able to put their toe in the water and get a sense, hey, if I do this, if I agree with the appointment authority and ultimately the governor to consider me for appointment to the board, that the job that I'm being asked to do as a volunteer board member is one that connects to my interests, and I think I could add value. It's better to know going in than once you are there that, whoa, this isn't exactly what I thought I was signing up for. So an early orientation process. I remember when AGB, the association I led, was asked by a couple of states to actually build out such a program for statewide appointees to the various higher ed boards, just to give prospective board members a sense of what they're in for. And then once they are there, this orientation program is not a one and done. It's not a half a day overview, meeting the president, the board chair, the various committees, the provost, the finance people. It really is, to be an effective board, takes time, takes the same level of continuous improvement that we ask your institution on the academic side to pursue. And so there needs to be a commitment that board members are going to be focused on improving and broadening their awareness of what this responsibility is about over time and on an extended basis. Tim, thanks. If we can move to the next slide, please. Are we okay on that? Any questions? Let me run through this slide and then we'll see. The committee, I'm focused on the governance committee now. The committee has a responsibility and an opportunity to get a sense of new ideas about best practice in governance, and then advocate within the board, and maybe more broadly, maybe in your case, have to advocate through the commission. ideas related to governance that might help enhance and elevate the overall performance of the board. And that you don't have to go home and scratch your head and say, hey, what's new and what can I bring to the next board meeting? But you will, as you study, as you learn, as you read, as you think about your responsibilities and say, hey, we need a process or a policy related to this. Um, uh, and I'm going to begin to just kind of tee it up or ask our colleagues on the governance committee to tee up a consideration of how can we enhance governance to make sure that Tennessee State has the best darn board governance set of processes and policies available. And then, board leadership and the governance committee chair, the governance committee itself should be available to advance some of those initiatives with institution leadership, state leadership, uh, uh, the commission to elevate and improve board governance. The point here being that effective governance, getting governance right, is not a static set of responsibilities. Just as higher ed goes through constant, you've seen it, you've read it, you felt it, you're part of it, set of changes, transformational changes, high risk changes, it's important that governance keeps up or even stands ahead, being able to cope with some of those challenges. And that's your job. That's this committee's job. The committee, no surprise to y'all who've been on other kinds of boards, oversees conflict of interest, it reviews conflict of interest policies, deals with those challenges if in fact a conflict, there's nothing criminal about, it can be, conflict of interest so much as what there needs to be is a policy and a process that clarifies what is the various levels, what is material conflict and otherwise, and conflict that needs to be acted on, and conflict that needs to be made aware of colleagues on the board, and then how best to proceed. But the committee also has responsibilities when there are, and hopefully there never will be, but there will over the years, dysfunctional board member behavior, when the board begins to drift from hopefully a highly established and inclusive culture of board behavior. Again, the governance committee just has a big job of keeping governance on track. And it needs to be aggressive in doing so, backed up by policies, but also with makes sense understanding of what's going on in the boardroom. One of the things that public boards are sometimes not aware of is that although each of you has been appointed by the governor, and I'm not fully aware of the Tennessee process of how you go through the process to get to gubernatorial consideration. So we'll leave that for another time. But the point is that boards have a responsibility. Private boards appoint their own successors, their own new members, and you all understand that. But there's a sense that it's hands off when it comes to board members being considered and appointed to boards like yours, public institution, public system boards. And in some states, that's true, that the appointing authority, whatever that process is, has little interest or tolerance even of hearing from an institution about the qualifications, the needs, the expertise, the background, maybe even individuals specifically who would add value to joining the board. But in some states, I was on a public board in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and one day I was at a meeting and I got a call, and it was the governor, same governor who appointed me to the board. And he said, Rick, there are 2 or 3, I don't remember what it was, vacancies coming up on the board. This is Virginia State University, on the board on which I served. And what do y'all need? He asked. Do you have any ideas? And so you're gentle when that happens and respectful, mostly surprised. But so there are some places, some opportunities, you'd have to figure that out, where the board leadership, institution leadership, as that evolves at Tennessee State, can try gently or maybe forcefully, to influence consideration of board members when such vacancies are coming up. So just tuck that under your hat and see how that works going forward. The governance committee also has responsibilities as the cycle of board leadership moves forward to develop a slate of board officers, both for the immediate future, while at the same time, as implicit in this last bullet, giving opportunity to people on the board to demonstrate and to show interest in board leadership, whether it's committee chairs. Again, you have a small board, so everyone has a chance to be in leadership, I assume, but also board leadership going forward, meaning a succession plan is something that this committee should bear responsibility for going forward. Any questions on this, or should I keep going?
Keep going.
All right. Tim, if we can go to the next slide. This is a quick overview of, so what does it all mean? So what does a governing board do? And you know, I could write thousands of pages on this, but it's not helpful for this particular moment. But the committee, and I try to relate it to, again, back to the purpose of this conversation, and that is the governance committee's responsibilities. But keeping in mind my point that the governance committee helps to ensure that the board and the board members understand and are focused on both the scope, the breadth of their responsibilities, but also the limits of this high-profile voluntary responsibility. So threading the needle on how board members and the board as a whole meets its responsibilities is at times challenging. At times because the board is not focused on everything that it needs to be focused on at the level of depth it should be, or overly focused, almost in moving into the management level of some of these issues. Threading that needle, and I know you're in an interesting space on some of this right now, I'm talking long term, is essential. And this committee can play a role in ensuring that the governing board responsibilities are met. So quickly, so what are some of these governing board responsibilities? One, it's important. Higher education is, again, you've all, you know, I've read some of your bios, all of your bios, and you all have amazing backgrounds and impressive positions, and a number of you have served on not-for-profit boards, and at least one has been related to service in a higher ed board of you. So you're not, you know, so you have a sense of it. But the business of higher education is pretty darn complicated, not in the least of ways because of that very busy sandbox I referred to, and the multiple interests and pressures coming at you, both from inside and external to your institution. So it's essential, first and foremost, I think, that the board and board members need to understand the business, as well as obviously the specific challenges facing your institution. And again, that's an ongoing kind of a thing. The best boards build in, public and private, build into their agendas opportunities for what I call learning sessions, where experts from various aspects of either the university or about higher ed in general, maybe in Tennessee, maybe in the South, maybe nationally, maybe internationally, can come and spend time with the board just to kind of broaden the sense as to the context in which you are meeting your fiduciary responsibilities. So something to think about, but learning matters. Selecting, supporting, and then of course holding to account the university president, and I know that's going on right now, is essential. As you'll see in these slides as we go through a little bit more of them, the relationship between then the board and the president for all the obvious reasons, but even some of the less obvious reasons, is essential. There needs to be mutual confidence and trust between the board and the president. Candor for sure, but there's got to be a clear sense as to that you all are, for the most part, on the same page. And then once the decisions are made related to your future leadership, there needs to be a record. You all are busy people. You can't do the governance part of the job, your day job, your family responsibilities, and other things, and spend time helping to run the institution. And there needs to be a focus from board leadership, from this committee's leadership, and from each of you individually, a commitment that the day-to-day and even longer-term management of this institution is going to be under the able hands of your president going forward, with a set of mutual expectations that are developed, are considered, and hopefully agreed upon, so that everybody's in the same boat for the most part. But boards do add value. They build what I referred to when we last talked briefly, consequential governance, meaning that the board has to find a way to make a positive difference, both to the university, but also to higher education across Tennessee and beyond. And so the areas in which the board and board members need to have a sense of their responsibilities relate to the work of your previous committee conversation on financial oversight, on academic quality. Your business is the transfer of academic knowledge and the successful graduation and advancement of your graduates into the work world or beyond. And so understanding what is academic quality and how do we know as a board, we don't spend our life unless you do, processing, how do we judge academic quality? When I was on the board of Spelman College, they put me on the academic affairs committee, and I got to tell you, I was so confused, as were many of my colleague board members, because we didn't know what to ask. We didn't know whether the quality of our product met what our customers, current and future, were going to be shopping for, and that was years ago. And the world in that space has gotten ever more complex. So boards are spending, as they should, I believe, a lot more time on understanding what is quality, how do we probe at it, how do we make sure our policies facilitate success in both the academic quality and our students' own success, because at the end of the day, your job as a board, simply stated, is that you need to be able to say to your students, their families, to donors, your graduates, that you feel comfortable that they received what you promised them they would receive when you persuaded them to come and do their academics at Tennessee State. And if you can't answer that question, then you need to dig a little bit more deeply, because you own that responsibility as a board, not to do it, but to make sure that the quality and the success of your students are as it needs to be competitive. Boards are responsible for the strategic direction of a board, of the institution. And from my standpoint, it's about ensuring the long-term future. And so boards need to, you've got immediate issues, I get it, but you should also find a way to make sure that the board is looking way down the road in order to make sure that what you are addressing today is consistent with where the university needs to be headed in the long term. And you'll figure out how to do that as the process unfolds. Last on this list, and yet maybe in the current environment most important for you all, is shared governance. Again, you have that crowded sandbox, and the board is sort of the central piece of what's in a stakeholder with what's in that sandbox, but it is crowded, and from your internal communities, like your faculty, your administrators, donors, alums, governmental agencies and individuals in the government, who are always trying to affect how a public institution moves forward, but you all need to be resistant of that to a certain degree. Um, Shared governance hard, and when a university comes through a difficult and challenging set of moments, building shared governance back up requires outreach and trust, and it can't be done with the back of the hand. It has to be done with a focused, forward-looking kind of commitment. It's not about sharing your fiduciary authority. Shared governance should have probably 100 years ago been named something else, in my view, but because it's not really sharing governance. You cannot give away your fiduciary authority, but there does need to be an honest and open sense of recognizing where the expertise, like with faculty, lies, and how to be respectful and truly committed to making sure that that side, which is the central side of your institution, is working well, and that faculty recognize that the board is committed to making academics and their own situation at the university work well for them. It takes a lot of work. When things are perfect, it's difficult, and when things when there are some challenges, it just requires a lot of attention. I already talked about institution policies, and the essential ones these days, I just ripped from the headlines, have to do with freedom of speech and academic freedom. But the governing board bears responsibility for these governing policies as well as many others. Tim, if we can move on, please. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but you are fiduciaries. Each of you, as you know, I think, is individually, you have fiduciary responsibilities. So does the board as an entity. The key principles of duty of care, loyalty, obedience are driven by both state and federal and common law. Those are high bars. Your accrediting agency, the SACS, which periodically checks in with how things are going at Tennessee State. SACS especially has a special emphasis on fiduciary standards and making sure that the boards of the institutions that they check in on related to accreditation, that fiduciary activities, fiduciary responsibilities are being met at the level that they expect. And SACS is not shy for letting an institution know if there are shortcomings there. It is important to realize that that fiduciary responsibilities are related to the corporate entity. So no one member of this board, not any one of you. Well, you are fiduciaries and need to meet those standards, but none of you has the authority to act on behalf of the institution or a committee or its leadership, to take initiatives into your own hands. I'm assuming you know that, but it's important to remind you of that. That authority is limited to the corporate body unless the board asks any one specific member of the board to take a lead role in studying, reviewing, considering, and then bringing back to the board a specific set of responsibilities that could be through an ad hoc committee or maybe individually, because again, you have such a small board. But it is important to realize that board members shouldn't be out there making commitments or making statements related or implicitly tied to some level of authority, whether it's about admissions or grades or tenure or football tickets. It's not in your individual authority to act at that level. You are bound to those fiduciary responsibilities, but you are also bound to the fact that only actions by the board carry the weight of the board. Again, I want to move along. So let me just, there's a bullet in the middle of this page that talks about maintaining the public trust. It is also essential that you all recognize that the fiduciary body, the board, is fundamentally responsible to the university and its vision, its mission, its assets. And yet, as a public institution, here's where it gets a little bit challenging at times. You do have to recognize that as a public institution, you have to meet the public trust in what you are partially funded to do by the state. And so you have to calibrate that, and the fallout from that, or the implicit set of challenges, include the reputation of the institution itself. And reputations are easy to damage and tough to rebuild. And so I think it's essential that as y'all go forward, you keep an eye on responsibilities, but you also keep an eye on making sure the Tennessee State's reputation is making a steady improvement and will be protected by the board going forward. Let me move on. I may want to clear the deck so we can get some conversation going. If we can just go through, let's skip this one. I want to go to the one more, please. Yeah. This is just a simple depiction of how to consider if these kinds of drawings help. How to look at a highly effective board. So again, if you look at the left, it says the right composition. Again, as we said earlier, you have limited input on the composition of the board by virtue of being a public board and how you and your colleagues are selected, with the caveat that I put forward a little while ago. The bottom, the lightly shaded semicircle that talks about the right focus. It's essential that the board and the committees of the board focus on the priority issues that the board has to address. There are way too many boards that we can tell stories about, but we won't, that have moved on to individual agenda items by particular boards or other organizations that want to push the board in a direction that, while perhaps interesting, may not be the most pressing set of priority issues, and that need to be attended to by the board and its committees. And I think good leadership within the committees and the board are responsible for making sure that the agendas, the information, and the conversation really are focused on the essential elements. And then the last off to the right, where the right relationships are essential. And that has more to do with building a culture within the board of inclusivity and respect and welcoming all views. There are boards where various biases, it could be gender bias, could be a number of things that I've witnessed over the years, intrudes on the board's ability to really meet that standard of consequential governance or good governance, and intrudes on the ability to have the kinds of conversations that result in a board being highly effective. So if this is helpful to you, I call it to your attention. One last slide, and then we'll open this up for a while if we can. This is habits of this is what effective or consequential boards do, and how they meet their responsibilities. Again, I already talked about a candid and mutually supportive relationship with the president. Culture of inclusion is important. Fiduciary responsibilities, both individually and collectively, and how that plays itself out, that's essential. A culture of continuous improvement, both within the mission of the institution, but also within the performance of the board. Continuous improvement in the boardroom is key to meeting Clark Kerr's standard that I referred to at the start. Selecting an effective board chair, you have a new chair, but recognizing that there's only one voice that speaks for the board, and that is the chair. The president speaks for the institution, the board chair speaks for the board, and that's you probably are aware of it, but I can't emphasize that enough. A strong governance committee, that's what this has been about. Risk assessment, enterprise risk management, including risks to governance, should be at some point built in, I believe, to the work of the Tennessee State University Board. And so many of you from your professional backgrounds connect to assessing risk as part of decision making within your own organizations. I can tell you that it is a healthy and useful a way to approach some of the issues that come before the board in tracking the progress of the university, but also tracking how the board is doing. Shared governance we talked about, and then the focus on accountability, which in many ways lies at the base of what this committee is all about. So that's the run through of this, Madam Chair, and maybe we can open it up for some questions and comments if time permits.
Yes, I have one question that
Yes,
relates
sir.
to the fiduciary responsibility
Yeah.
of the board. What
Yes,
also
sir.
comes with that is, in terms of your knowledge of the landscape in education, is it a reasonable requirement to have additional officer and director coverage?
Yeah. You mean indemnification?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the automatic standard is in across the institutions in Tennessee. I was looking for that and I didn't find it in the bylaws, but it just I missed it. But yes, I do, and there are two ways to do that. One, the institution, or maybe the commission, I don't know how that works, but should build that in. But there's also an opportunity for each of you on the board. You ought to chat. It sounds weird, trust me, if you haven't done it before for other assignments. But there are insurance policies related to your own homeowner's insurance that allows for a kind of an umbrella policy inclusive of some of that enhanced indemnification. When I joined the several boards, both in higher ed and a couple of other not-for-profit boards, I went to my homeowner's insurance and got additional, very affordable coverage that allowed me to sleep. However you do it and wherever it comes from, it's a smart thing to do. Let me ask a question while we're waiting for others to ask a question. Do these elements of both the governance committee but also board responsibility connect with how some of you are thinking about the challenges you've agreed to address and know you'll be facing going forward? Anybody?
I think definitely they do. I think as we are finding out more information and having the various departments and the cabinet report to us, I think it's kind of helping us figure out what else we need to know as we continue to move forward.
Good point.
And I agree. I've seen a high level of engagement from the board thus far. Everyone remains attentive, asks good questions, and I think we're having robust debate and conversation with the university and even among ourselves in the meeting to really dig into some of the things we need to dig into, but also just evidence that we are invested as Board of Trustee members.
That's great. And again, you are at a sort of a tipping point within the institution. And so how deeply you engage, and at some point, can you calibrate a high level of a deeper dive from the more oversight role that you will rebound back to is something that you all ought to just keep in mind as you proceed. It's essential to the long-term ability of the board to meet its overall responsibilities. But I think what you just said is terrific.
Is there a tool today that's in place to use to evaluate the president's performance as well as
Yeah.
the,
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
There are. So simple answer is yes. And we can help with that, going forward. But, you know, everybody, I think, we all want to know how well we're doing, right? Under the assumption that we all think we're doing pretty well at what we do. So board members need to be assessed, administrators need to be assessed, presidents, they want to be assessed, both annually, as they should be, but that needs to be a robust process, and even periodically with a more of a 360 style assessment. We have tools for all of that, and it's essential to know. And so it's the right question. It's the timing and the process that needs to be put in place to be fair, to be candid, and to be sufficiently robust to help.
So I guess my question, coming off of what Trustee Tucker said, and is directed to Secretary Pendleton, is there currently a process for that, for the board to evaluate? And can you tell us the timing of that and how it's the procedure?
Yeah, there's, the previous board had passed a process, so that process usually commences after the fiscal year, where the president establishes and puts together a written statement of goals, and how she achieved those goals. So it's a document that I can go over with you, I can send to you to have, but there is a process and there's a timeline, and it involves the executive committee, and someone on that administering, sort of shepherding it through that process, and involves the input of the entire board, with respect to, looking at the goals and looking at the statement of achievements and whether or not those have been met. So yes, there's a process.
Thank you.
it's a
That
process
sounds to me like an effective one. Making sure it's inclusive of, especially with the size board you have, is essential.
and the timing of the board evaluation of its effectiveness, is that around the same time frame annually, or was there?
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't, annually is a lot.
Yeah, our policy provides for some sort of self-assessment every maybe 3 years. Also
Yeah.
keeping in mind, as Rick was talking about earlier, from a SACS perspective, that's also something that's required from a governance perspective.
I was just going to refer to SAC.
Self-assessment
But yeah, you know,
of
if
the
you
board.
commit to 2-3 years of that kind of assessment, coupled with, again, and I know your initial terms of the all of you who are new, you ought to work through that process as well as to how frequently or not, and it could be at the end of term, individual members of the board need to be assessed. You know, one of the things to keep in mind, I think one of these slides referred to it, and I didn't jump on it, is that one person who is never or rarely ever assessed in the organizational structure of colleges and universities is the chair of the board. And so about, I don't know, 7-8 years ago at HEB, we came up with the idea that we need to come up with a process by which a board chair is assessed as well. So it's not just board members, it's not just the president plus everybody else. The board chair needs to be assessed as well. And I can tell you, just to be truthful, that idea didn't go down well. But slowly but surely, I have seen more and more boards realize that the concept of assessment doesn't necessarily have to imply bad things. It just is candid. It's accountability. And so I have seen more and more boards, public and private, begin to put their toe in the water about how should we take a look at the overall performance and leadership and trust and confidence and outreach and all of the expectations of a board chair. How is that person doing? And having a process in place to do that is healthy. And if you want to have a really favorable shared governance relationship with all of the other stakeholders we alluded to in this conversation and that are out there, to be able to say that we not only assess members of our board and we have a periodic assessment of the board as an entity, but we even take a look at the board chair. That goes a long way in a good way to those shared governance challenges that you either are directly made aware of or have an undercurrent of concern across the institution. So tuck it away. We can talk about it later, but it's a healthy exercise.
Thank you. As we are drawing this presentation to a close, are there any other questions?
Good morning. I want your take and perspective on possibly this board doing a retreat and your opinion on that and how useful you think that would be for us and a possible timeline for that.
Yeah,
that
who
you
am I
recommend.
talking to? I have a hard time seeing from here.
Pardon me?
Who's asking I just can't see people close up, so.
Dr. Young Siegler, I apologize.
Oh, no, you don't have to apologize. Thank you. There's nothing better than a board retreat. Periodically, every couple of years, or in the case of this board, maybe sooner than that because you're still in your formative role. I wouldn't do it this week, but I think at some point, as you move forward with some of the hard decisions that you're facing, maybe after you resolve the presidential decision, it would be healthy to convene, and we'd be happy to help you facilitate that. You should be sure to have an external facilitator help you frame the agenda, make it exciting, make it robust, make it happen somewhere else if you're allowed. You may have to do it in certain environment and environs because of the nature of the requirements of where your boards meet in Tennessee, but off campus for sure. And it could be very healthy, and it could build that board culture. You know, every board, I don't care whether you have 8 people on the board, or as we did at Spelman, 27 people on the board, or at Virginia State where we had 15. The social dynamic within a board is so essential. Building that camaraderie and candor, and I know there are restrictions on how those conversations have to be held, and your general counsel and others will help clarify how to pull this off. But to the extent that you could have a rich and open, candid, and freewheeling retreat around essential issues, around building a relationship with the president, prioritizing your challenges, and just getting a sense of the heartbeat, if you will, of how this board's going to meet its responsibilities and interact with stakeholders. You can't beat a retreat if you can build one within the context of Tennessee requirements. So I think it's a great question, and I would encourage you to figure out if it can be done, and if so, go ahead and do it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Legion. If there is nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Secretary Pendleton, can you please call the roll?
Trustee Smith,
Yes.
Trustee Chapman,
Yes.
Trustee Witten.
Yes.
The motion is approved. The time is now 10:01, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will take about a 15-minute recess for facilities break and all of the things, and we will come back right at, well, actually, it's going to be 14 minutes. So see y'all at 10:15.